Hello people, welcome to episode 6 of Tyrent Podcast. Today we have Michael Breese from Riot Games who's currently working on League of Legends Wild Rift as a game designer. Michael also was a designer on Warner Brothers' upcoming game Hogwarts Legacy. So, if you wanna be a badass game designer like Mike or want to know how to get into AAA companies like Riot or Warner Brothers, this one's for you. For our super busy audience, binge watch the whole episode with our timestamps on the description or on the first comment below. So without any further ado, let's welcome Mike.
How are you, right?
I'm good. I'm good. Yeah, like I said, excited. I know we've been wanting to do this for a bit, and then just like life and busy and everything. Um, but yeah, things are starting to calm down just a little bit, and so yeah.
Yeah, so you have moved to another city, I guess, and joined another company, Riot, and you are telling me that you are working with League of Legends Wild Rift.
Yeah. I haven't moved yet. So I'm still here out of Salt Lake City, Utah, for the next few months. Basically, the plan is with COVID and where the world's at and everything that I can work from home for a little while, and then I'll move out there to the office, and hopefully the office can open around that time. But I mean, it's we'll see because like we don't have a vaccine or anything. So.
Yeah. Fingers crossed. I guess it's coming soon.
I mean, we'll see. I'm still. I mean, soon is relative. I don't imagine we'll have one for probably the soonest would be mid next year. Is kind of
Yeah,
my thought.
absolutely. Mid next year.
But
So, Michael, let's get started today's episode.
yeah,
Absolutely. So, first of all, I want to tell you that how grateful I am that you are giving me your time today because I know that you guys have all the tasks and you gonna kind of wanna rest in this weekend, but you are giving me your time and I'm so grateful to that. So, without a further ado, let's get started. So,
cool.
Michael, before we get started, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. So yeah, like you said, my name is Mike Breese. I am a game designer at Riot Games. I don't know. Stop me whenever. But yeah, so before Riot, I worked at WB Avalanche on Hogwarts Legacy that just barely got announced. And then just a few other smaller things. I was a grad student at University of Utah prior to that, and then I've worked on a few smaller indie projects and things kind of along the way on that journey that I'm happy to go into if you're interested or want to hear anything there. But
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to go to all of your journey today, and I'm really excited to talk game design to you because I have lots of questions, both personal one and lots of people have told me to ask some questions. I have also their questions as well. So,
okay.
the first question is my personal question, and the question everyone told me to ask you is that what is the role of a game designer? Because a lot of people ask that like think that game designer is something has to do with art or something, but I know that's not the thing. So could you kind of like clear it up?
Yeah. So I mean, it is muddy. It doesn't I would say no, it's not an artist, but art skills are definitely helpful, especially depending on the role. Like you're going to be working with artists and you're going to be working with engineers, and so knowing at least some of the language and how to communicate is really helpful. One area where art is, I think, super helpful is in prototyping. Very early on, especially as like a level designer, you're going to be building out levels and it's not going to be using final art. You don't want it to be. You're going to be using a lot of just colored boxes, but you're still going to want to convey an idea with that. So art is very helpful in that sense. And it's just helpful overall because clarity is super important in game design, and art, a lot of art's focus is on clarity. So there is definitely some overlap, but you're not an artist. Depending, and kind of the role of the game designer can change a bit depending on uh, what the what your studio is. Sometimes, like where I'm at, it's systems and balance, so it's a lot of numbers and trying to make the game feel good there. But early on, a game designer might be really focused around prototyping and figuring out what the core of the game is. to going into play testing and fixing bugs. All of that can kind of go through. But in a lot of ways, I see the role of the game designer as your job is to essentially know the pillars of whatever feature you're working on. Like I'm very pillar focused in my design. So like we've got these 3 things that we're wanting to have. And your job is to kind of check any ideas or features or content against those pillars and make sure that they work with what you're trying to do. You're also a bit of a salesman to your team. It doesn't mean that it's your own idea that you're trying to sell. You're the champion of whatever's best for the players. Like Riot's very player focused, and so that's something that we're always. It is 100% coming up all the time in meetings and everything of like, what do we want to do with, is this something that's the best for the players? So you're championing a lot of that. And there's even different roles within game design. Like I've got a close friend who he's very narrative focused, and I am very like systems focused. So we, in a good way, we butt heads a lot, and so it kind of makes the game better overall. But there's a lot of different branches that you can kind of go into within game design, but they're all kind of still focused around that core idea of creating that experience that your game is trying to convey.
Wow, sounds like a lot of tasks. There's a lots of stuff you have said, like, and I have read all the documentation you have on your website, like from the hard life vector to, and I know you are a good writer. And the
Okay.
moment you have said that you have that pillar, I actually that thing you wrote in the hard light vectors, like 4 pillars you wanted to do, and that I remember, and I'm like, exactly, this is the thing I wanted to do, because game design is one of the thing that makes games better, but we can't see a game design. Like a game design's job is to do something. But like, for me, I am trying to make an RPG in Unity, but I have no idea how to design a game because I'm a programmer. I don't know how to design a game. So that's the reason I asked you that question, and you have cleared that very well. My second question is obvious that you have said there's a lots of stuffs into game design, like narrative system. What other the branches of the game design, if you could a little elaborate?
Yeah. So there's kind of like, so I'll go over kind of some of the major ones, but these they do break down within, and it really kind of depends on the game that you're working on, as how your studio may want to break it down further. But for a lot of new designers, they're likely to be starting in level design. So that's kind of working on the play space. Not It could be multiplayer maps if it's something like Call of Duty or Halo, or anything like that, but it can also be single player focused, like Last of Us, all of those levels that are going through and trying to convey a feeling, or we should trigger a cutscene at this point. This is where enemies should come in. All of that kind of stuff starts to fall in with like a level designer. A big thing with them, with level design, is like sight lines and clarity, because you're trying to guide a player through an experience, especially single player, if you don't want them to be missing everything. Some things are okay, and I mean, it depends on what you're trying to do. But that's a huge thing there. And then clarity in multiplayer, you want to be, if you're playing capture the flag or something, you want to be able to know where the other team's base are, where weapons or pickups, things like that might be. So that's a huge focus there for level design, and that's where a lot of early designers kind of get started. Systems design, which is what I do and what I really care about, is kind of a really easy way to think about it is, if you ever play any board games, they're almost pure systems design, of like, you're not level design, there's a little bit going on, but how a deck of cards and the rules of Magic the Gathering, for example, those are all game systems that go in. So it's a huge role of how these affect everything. If you make changes over here, how is that going to affect this? In League of Legends, for example, if we change an item, that has a huge effect on all the characters in the game. And so that's kind of where you're playing at. Or if we're doing like changes to the game, like this preseason for League, we're doing a big item rework, and so that obviously has a very large effect. So that's kind of where systems plays in, and myself with balance of just trying to get everyone to a win rate where they're not seen or where they're not oppressive, and where people aren't frustrated with them, and it's still fun. Narrative design is very focused around kind of that overall experience. Some of it's writing the game, some of it's just kind of atmosphere of a particular area. Who a character is really important. If there's any themes that you're trying to touch on. I know a lot of people who really want to get into narrative design, and so that's kind of where they come from. Movies are obviously a really good place to look at. It's a really good common touchstone, but I think one area where games really shine that I'd love to see more of from upcoming narrative designers is a more of a interaction, not just here's a story that I'm being told as I play. Those can be fine. I still love those, but something where it's adapting or playing with what I'm doing. Telltale was really good at this, and so that's I think kind of those are three major areas there. You also are going to have some things like content, and that's part of like a systems design of creating particular characters, items, or just kind of getting things out there. Story is kind of like narrative as well, and so it's really just how you want to break down further from that. But those are probably the three main that come to mind for me. Another one that I think kind of that you actually may be really interested in is coming from an engineering background is like a tech designer. It's kind of the bridge between a game designer and an engineer. And so you kind of work with both teams. You create tools for the designers. You help in that communication where like I can't communicate. I know a little bit of programming and stuff, but it can help bridge that gap, or potentially make features. If I was creating a character, for example, and I needed to write some whole new tool, that's a lot of where a tech designer can come in. And so they're
Wow.
kind of they're
Wow.
as designers as well.
Like I never ever heard this term tech designer, and this is the first time I'm hearing. And honestly, it kind of reminds me that like yeah, I am kind of like interested in like I am very much into engineering part, but there is something inside me wants to design something, wants to make something. Like there's a method of in this madness, and I want to explore that a particular like not formula, but there has to be a system inside this, like not just total story and not just randomness. It just has to be a method, and that's the part I'm really interested in. So thank you so much for explaining that. uh, I'm just curious, how could you get this much passion about game design? Like what's your story, man?
Yeah. So I think like a lot of people, I grew up playing video games and board games and everything, kind of going through. For myself, it started very young of like play creating alternate ways to play Magic the Gathering. We were really big into that when we were young. My brother and I and our circle of friends. Um, and so it was different ways to play that. We watched that old episode of Yu-Gi-Oh where they had
Yeah,
the
Yu-Gi-Oh,
maze.
right. I used to see that all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. So like we watched that where they had the maze and we're like, oh, that's a cool idea. They didn't really do much in the show, but we got this giant piece of cardboard, drew out a maze. And everything, and we're like, okay, how would the rules of this work? Of how many spaces can a character move? Um, how big of the should the maze itself be? Things like that. Um, some of the earliest stuff I got into was like we made an early MOBA in Warcraft 3, kind of the originator of MOBAs with Dota and everything. And so we made our own, super bad, but like it was a good learning experience. And then so it's been something that I've always been interested in. And then I've spent a little bit of time with like psychology. So my background in psychology is in kind of design psychology, and so I've kind of cycled that in through it, as well as just user research. So I think that's also super important that I've kind of taken in to game design. And then one thing that isn't going to get a little bit less exciting for a minute. So my just a quick history on me is so my parents have both passed away, and my
I'm
dad
so
when I was
sorry.
very young. Thank you. Yeah. My dad when I was very young, my mom more recently, 5 or 6 years ago, and so after she passed away, I was working in more of a like general software setting, call center, user research type stuff, and I was like, okay, this isn't really what I'm enjoying doing, and having lost both my parents, this is something where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna take a shot at really do this. Um, and so that's kind of what brought me into going to school for it. I also had worked on like I said a few smaller projects throughout, hosted tournaments, local tournaments for
Yeah,
Super Smash Bros.
I have seen all of that. I have seen all of that. I have go through all the stuff before I went on talking to you, because I really wanted to know more about you. And the more I saw your website, the more I wanted to learn. And you might not believe it. I spent 4 hours yesterday just to in your website.
So is that a poor UX on my website trying to navigate through, or
No,
is
no, no,
that,
no. I was just reading all the stories. Like Hardlight Vector story was really, really amazing. Mainly the when you guys wanted to make like kind of like Lego kind of stuff while making enemies, and but you guys have decided to make one enemy, and you have maintained that like what's that that player is going that opposite kind of direction, the enemies attack or something, like dodging.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's the main mechanics, and I read all of that, including all this that RPG dungeon kind of RPG you have made. I actually forgot that name. uh, I read that stuff, and I read all the stuff, and that's where I figured out that you have done a lot of stuff in this game design, and you are so passionate about this. So my next question is, doesn't what's the biggest challenge you face in all your journey? Like, what's the biggest challenge as a designer you face?
um the biggest thing, and I think everyone's going to face this, is especially in games, but I think in any media, especially creative medias, is going to be imposter syndrome, and this feeling of like, this is what I want to do, but who am I to say that, like, oh, I know game design. That sounds very cocky to
Yeah,
say,
yeah,
and
yeah. It
so
happens. It happens to me. It happened to me. Actually, it happened to me.
yeah, and it's something that I think everyone faces, um, and so I think, and you're going to come in and out of that. Like there are points on different projects where I'm like, okay, I've been here a bit, I understand what's going on, but then at the same time, like I come into Riot and I'm brand new, and I'm like, I'm working with these people who've been doing this for years, and like, I'm going to tell you that we should do this change. That there's some of that that can come in and feel awkward. You're also going to run into challenges, to kind of finish that point off real quick, is it's something everyone faces there, and it's something everyone's aware of, and um, just kind of own it is what I've seen. Like, don't be afraid to ask questions. It's actually super helpful. People like helping people, and it's a good way for you to learn, and it just hurts yourself when you're not asking for help. But some of the other changes that or some of the other challenges that I think you come into, like, I am not art focused at all. I know a little bit of like engineering and stuff, so I was able to work with my engineers and kind of talk through things there. But when it came to art, one of my big weaknesses was I'd talk with them and I'd say, here's kind of the idea of what I want, but I don't know what the steps are to that. I need to trust you guys on how to handle this. And so it was a lot of trusting your team. That's one thing that I really champion, is just trusting your team. Like, you're working with you're working with experts, you're working with people that a team you've picked or chosen to be a part of, and so you have to trust them. And it can be hard to do that at times, because like, you're, like I said, you're going to butt heads with people, you're going to struggle to be on the same page, but you need to know that everyone's working towards that same goal. And so that's a big challenge that you can run into there. uh, Communication and conveying your ideas, whether it's your own idea or not, and knowing kind of, this is the hill that I want to die on. I know that this is the right way to go, compared to someone else who just knows that this is the right way to go. How do you solve those kind of conflicts? Playtesting's a big one there. what gives, if they both achieve the goal, what one is easier to do, what one has the least impact or the best impact on other areas. And that's again where those pillars that I was talking about come in, is like everyone has cool ideas and everyone has different directions that they can take the game at any point. But if you know that our pillars are X, Y, and Z, then that helps guide those decisions.
All right, all right. That maybe that's the reason you have figured out all the pillars first before making the games, and then you go into the game. So when there might be any conflicts happen, you can always revert back to those pillars and actually understand what is this game is about, right?
Exactly, exactly. And to be clear, when you set those pillars at the beginning, they don't necessarily have to stay. Like you don't want them to be so flexible to where they change every week or anything. But if you realize, hey, these two pillars we really like, but this third one over here, it doesn't work with these other pillars, or we're not able to hit this one because of tech restraints, time, or whatever, then you can change that. Or if you realize, hey, these are the pillars we've got, but we've made this game and it's actually really fun and going in a little bit of a different direction, feel free to change those a little bit to still kind of follow that fun. Um, but it's just a really good way to kind of keep everyone on your team going in the same direction, as well as yourself, because you're going to be working on something, and then there's going to be days where you've written some amazing mechanic, and then you're like, oh, we should change the game to be this, and then this, and then this, and then it's just a kind of like a guiding light.
Wow, wow, amazing, amazing. Like it's just opening my eye before I went on going to make my game. Like I really had like obviously you have played Diablo 3, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Actually, I was before I haven't told you. Actually, I was going to Utah this year, but due to this COVID happened, I deferred my admission and I'm going to Utah 2021. So I have decided before I am going to Utah, I'm going to make a full game that I am really proud of. And one of the games I'm really want to make is kind of like narrative. Like there has to be a story, has to be a goal, something, and I wanted to make an RPG. So I have like I know how to make it, but I didn't know how to design it properly. And reading your website was really helpful because you got me understand what could
Thank you.
be the like what could be the process. Your heart I'm going to tell it again, your heartlight vector documentation was amazing. I'm going to read it again, and I'm going to link it down in the description so that each and everyone can read it. So like coming to your point, like you have worked with like big game, like the biggest names in this game industry, like Warner Brothers, Riot Games, League of Legends, Hogwarts Legacy, and you also have an award-winning indie game, Hardlight Vector. So what's the difference in the process? Like what how as a designer you tackles the challenges of indie versus AAA?
Yeah, yeah. So to clarify real quick, so that award that we won there, that is 100% the artists. That was an art award that we won there. I was a designer and a producer on that project, so I didn't do a lot to win that award. That was 100% on them. But yes, they deserve it. The stuff that they put together and the stuff that we in such a short time that we had to do, I am astounded with. You can't. Well, I'm gonna cheat a little. Like this was the poster that we had and
Wow,
everyone signed it.
that's the enemy.
Yeah, yeah, that's our Colossus right there, or our Riven. And yes, and then you can kind of see down there. It's a little harder, but
Yeah, it's
our
all the sign names. I guess it's your
yeah.
teammates.
Yeah, yeah. So that's everyone that worked on that. I made sure to steal that poster before anyone else could, because I was like, I'm gonna hang this and keep it. But yeah, artists were phenomenal on that project. Especially, like I said earlier, on trusting your team. That was something huge there. That I trusted them, and it really worked out for us. Um, but to your question on kind of the differences between working on AAA and indie games, there's a lot of similarities. Still, you're still very trying to be very player focused, and depending on the indie game, it can shift a bit to like AAA. As a general rule, you have these deadlines that you need to hit, And but on an indie game, that can be a bit more flexible. You're still depending on what you're doing. Like if it's a personal hobby project and you're just working on the side, you may not have any real deadlines that you're worried about. You could be working on this for years, but if you're using your own savings to make this, then you probably need to have some schedule, some deadlines that you need to set on yourself. AAA, again, there can be a little bit of flexibility, but depending on the studio, those are things where we're planning on shipping on this date. That means we have these milestones. Now, that date can shift a little bit depending, but as a general rule. And then data is the biggest thing. On an indie game, you don't have like user data for a live game. You probably have some things hooked up that you're using, but it's something that is you need to be an you need to hook up yourself. You need to know how to use all of that. Whereas larger studios and AAA studios, you'll have teams that are dedicated to that kind of stuff and dedicated to play testing, as well as just the data from live play that you can use to help inform your decisions. Now, you don't want to use that data to just make decisions for you, but you want to use that to help guide you. Engaging with the community is another huge thing. Indie games can do this really well, where if you have a team of 4 or 5 people, you can talk on your Steam forums, you can talk on Twitter and everything, and chat with everyone, and then make changes really quick. Small teams, it's a lot easier to be more agile and move quicker. But for like a larger game, it may take longer to make any particular changes, and you may not be able to engage with that community as easily. That's something that I really love with Riot is we're encouraged to talk with the community. I actually talked with my boss about doing this and talking with you, and he was like ecstatic. He was like, this is the kind of thing that I think is really good, helping people learn game design and get into things. So congrats yourself, by the way.
Thank you so much.
But yeah, like
actually,
this.
actually, I'm really excited about this because I'm actually trying to connect as many people as like as I can, and one of the things I could start is from University of Utah. Those are people, kind of, those are my people, and I can always count on them. So that's the main reason I always talk with them. I talk with you, and I also I also talk with Nathan, and he also agreed to come on the show. So
Oh, nice.
yeah, so thank you, thank you for that. Like you all told me about him. So coming back to your point, like you are doing a phenomenal job there. But one of the things I wanted to ask you is that, like, your job as a designer, is that somehow overlaps with artists or engineers? Like, is design affects artist or engineer in their process?
Yeah. For like some of the stuff that we talked about earlier of being able to communicate cross teams. Before I started at the University of Utah, I I was lucky enough. I had saved up. I had known this was something I was wanting to do for a while. And kind of the same thing that you were talking about doing is I said, okay, I've got 2 months. I am just doing this full time because I know I'm going to be working with some rock stars. And so I want to be able, I don't want to be the guy that drags people down. And that really kind of gave me a leg up on kind of getting started. That was in Unity, but really Unity, Unreal, any engine is going to be a good way to kind of learn some of that. But working with those other, with artists and engineers, just being able to communicate more clearly, knowing some things like animations, for example, like typically a game you want to run at 60 frames per second, depending, but like generally that's the rule. But animation frames don't need to run at 60. 30 is typically what gets used there for a real-time game. And so just things like that can be helpful. Being able to communicate across, as well as just jump in, like I said before. I can write a little bit of C#. I have friends who can do some blueprinting and everything, and I've learned a little bit of that through the program. And just white boxing. For Hard Light Vector, our artists worked on the game, but their final assets did not make it in until about halfway through our development because we were just white boxing things going through, and we said, okay, this is generally what we want. We need a building over here. And so they were working on those buildings, but we kept it really cheap in game. At one point, we had an entire spaceship that was in there that we were playing with, and we didn't want to waste those art resources building a spaceship that we eventually threw away. To be fair, they didn't make one and we threw it away. They made something very cheap, very prototypey, and then scrapped that. And that's kind of what those prototypes are for. Stuff that your artists can do, stuff that your designers with some art skills can do. Super helpful. But you don't need to be an expert on everything, but you need to be knowledgeable about everything. And that's not just engineering and art, just world in general as a designer. If I'm working on a skateboarding game or I want to have something, some fast movement type stuff, a little bit of knowledge in those areas can go a long way.
Wow, wow. I can absolutely relate to that because one of the things that happening to me because as I have said that I'm an engineer and I totally love working on like with raw codes and I love that. But there are stuff that I couldn't do is that when I talk to some artists, like I couldn't say that what they're trying to do, and I couldn't understand their language basically. So I had a like I had a huge comic book junkie, and I love doing like characterizations, making characters, making stories and stuff. I also made a animated short. If you wanna see, I could show you that. Wait a minute.
Definitely. Yeah, send
Wait a
that my
minute.
way and I'll check that out.
Where is this? Okay. Let
Yeah,
me show
and
you
comic
that.
books, like I'm a pretty big comic, especially like Marvel and a big comic nerd.
I'm a totally hands-on DC.
You're on DC?
Yeah, I'm on DC. No,
Oh, how dare you?
I love Marvel as well. I love Marvel as well. Even there's two books, comic books back there. I would love to show you that. Before that, here is the animated short I made. It's kind of a Harry Potter stuff. Yeah, this is the stuff. It's 6 seconds.
Yeah, see, stuff like this is perfect. We actually, something we did very early on with Hard Light Vector, we knew we wanted to have this kind of fast-paced, fluid movement. One of the philosophies that I kind of bring or that I champion a lot is if you can make movement in the game fun, the rest of the game will be fun. And so an animator who worked on our project very early on, Rob Bear, he's actually at Sony Santa Monica now, great guy, but he actually created this Spider Gwen animated short of running up walls, flips, all that kind of
Wow.
stuff, very similar to what you have right there in terms of like these just to kind of storyboard out something. And something like that, like I've seen very similar things when we like you if you've seen the Hogwarts Legacy trailer that came
Yeah,
out,
I've
very
saw
similar things there.
dozens of times, dozens of times.
Yeah, exactly. Same kind of stuff that you were working on there, and that's something that I couldn't do that you have. So that's a great skill to have, just to kind of say, hey, I'm looking to do something. If an artist makes something, you're like, let's change it to be more like this, and you're able to put something together or at least even talk with them about that. Sorry, excuse me.
No,
um,
obviously.
but yeah, super cool to be doing that, and it's just one of those things that's constantly going to be leveling you up.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I was saying, I actually forgot to tell you that I said I'm a comic book fan. You can see these guys. Yeah. So like I actually love doing all this stuff, and after I made that animated short, I actually could convey my ideas to artists and animators that what I want to do. And one of my artists who is a 3D modeler, I couldn't understand what he is talking about, like retopology and other stuff, UV unwrapping, and I couldn't understand. So I made one character. So here is the character. You can see, I guess. Here's one.
Oh, that's really impressive. There's one of the classes that they have at the U of U for producers, is essentially it's an art focused class of like learn how artists do art. It's incredibly difficult for a lot of people because like I had no art skills. It was one of the hardest classes I ever took, but super helpful in learning those kind of stuff. Like I'm still not able to make something like that model that you have there, but just to be able to go through, I'm like, okay, I know a little bit of Substance Designer now. I've used things like Maya. Even though again, like I'm not an artist, but able to understand some of that
Yeah,
and get something
exactly.
in. And
Exactly.
a
Like,
character like that, like you can put that into your game. I
yeah,
mean, depend like if
actually,
it matches the
that's my
art, but yeah.
RPG character. That's my
Oh,
RPG
perfect,
character.
perfect.
Yeah, actually, I love doing all this stuff. Kind of, a lot of people say I'm a nerd, but I'm a
Well, of
proud nerd.
course, of
I'm a
course. Yeah, I
proud
mean, you're
nerd.
working in games. Like you're gonna be a nerd working in games, and I don't think that that's a problem. You're gonna be very welcomed.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like, coming back to our questions, like you have told that you have walked on like hard light vector and that spaceship and kind of stuff. And I was wanted to ask, could you please explain your experience on hard light vector? Because I'm really interested, because after a couple of years, I have to make one big project by myself. So I would love to know that.
Yeah, yeah. So to clarify, not by yourself. For Hard Light Vector, we had a team of I think it ended up being 20 like full-time in-house people,
Wow,
all of the students there.
lots
Um,
of people, man.
Yeah, yeah, and that was one of our goals is we wanted to have a large team because that was more uh, a small team, like say 4 or 5 people, super useful, super fun, and but you run into different challenges than on a larger team. And our team, we very much wanted to focus on these are people who want to go work at Sony, Riot, Blizzard, a lot of these big name studios, and so we wanted to have that experience of being on these bigger teams. And we broke it up into smaller groups to focus.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
I read that.
yeah.
You have enemy, environment, and player systems. There are three
Yep.
teams.
Yeah, yeah. So those were kind of the three
See, I'm
things
a
that
thorough
we
reader.
yeah, yeah. So those were the three teams that we kind of branched under, and then underneath that, we were all underneath kind of our producer king, Utkarsh, who really kind of held us accountable.
Utkarsh
Um,
Agarwal.
yes, yeah, exactly, yeah, him.
Yeah, I know, I
Uh,
know, I know him. I know him.
Okay, yeah, perfect. So yeah, so I worked as like the designer and the producer for the enemies team, Nathan over the player side, and then Ben over for the environment and level side. But we were all held accountable to him, and that's very similar to what you're going to see at larger studios. Again, indie, you're going to have a lot more overlap between things. You might be an engineer and a designer and an artist, kind of like what you're doing yourself. Like that, that's very much an indie kind of project. But yeah, you're going to be broken up there. I'm sorry, I forgot exactly what your question was. I got
Yeah,
sidetracked.
I don't know. No, actually, I wanted to ask you that what your experience on Hard Light Vector, and you are
Oh,
doing exactly that, and it's actually great to
okay.
listening all your experiences.
Yeah, yeah. So okay, so to kind of go back just a little bit there, um, we actually started the summer beforehand. Very like we were like, hey, anyone who's interested in working on this, we've kind of got a general idea. We moved very far away from that. Our original idea was co-op Shadow of the Colossus, but that's incredibly challenging,
That's
especially for a
challenging, man.
six-month. Yes. And just we knew we didn't want to do anything with networking because that's just a whole other I mean, you're an engineer. If I say, "Hey,
Yeah,
we're going
yeah,
to do networking."
that's so hard, man. That's so hard, and I actually couldn't even understand what are the kind of stuff going on. Even that's the reason I'm going to ITA. If I understand this, I don't have to go to that.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. So we switched we changed the game, but we still kept a lot of the core pillars and the feelings we were trying to go for. Fast movement against a giant enemy. That was still very much the focus. But so we started very early on with just kind of prototyping. One of the prototypes I made in Unreal was magnet focused, of like you can charge objects with a positive or a negative charge to pull things in and away. That ended up getting scrapped, but I learned a lot working on that. The Spider Gwen type running thing was something that we worked on very early, but it all kind of coalesced in this direction that we wanted to go, and so that was super helpful. So we kind of early on established, okay, we're probably going to have This is how we imagine team size to be based on people being interested. This is the direction that we thought everyone was pretty excited about. And this was before our teams were like official. So we some of the people who worked on with early on these projects ended up working on other teams, but they still they still very much helped us get to where we are. And then then we kind of went into a more solid prototyping phase of figuring out the direction, kind of split into two teams of like, here's the player side. Some of the stuff they did was like catching razor blades and throwing them back out. And then the boss side, and then eventually that coalesced together into our actual team and project once those kind of got formed. We had there was definitely some struggle early on. Some of the surveys that the teams had done were we expected, but they were like, hey, our team, not everyone's on the same page, so how can we go ahead and address that? We ended up addressing that, and I think by the end our team was incredibly excited for what we had been doing, but it's kind of a feedback thing. And that's something that Utkarsh was super helpful for us with, was that he was running those sprint reviews and sprint plannings and retrospectives and all the stuff that kind of goes into that a producer better than myself would do. And so that just kind of helped move us in that right direction. One of the big challenges that sticks out for me for sure was our goal was we want to get the game released before GDC. So for people listening, how the program works is you go to GDC when there's not a pandemic, and then you have
that's sad.
Yeah, and so we snuck in before the pandemic and everything there, but you go to GDC, you get to have a lot of fun. You do that each year, and so we were like, okay, we want to ship right before GDC, and then we'll have the 2 months, I think it is, afterwards to listen to community feedback, bug fixes, stuff like that, and now that it's shipped, so we can get that post-launch experience. But we were a couple weeks before GDC, and Utkarsh and Nathan both came to me and they said, we're worried about where the boss is at. Do we think that we should ship this game before without the boss, so that we can get it out there and still meet that deadline? And so there was a bit of back and forth. I probably got angrier and more heated than I needed to, but talking with them of like, no, I think we can do this. I am confident. The team's worked very hard to get this. We know we can do it. And then we talked with the rest of the team to see, how do they feel? And so I stepped back and I let them all talk, and we were confident that we could do it. And we did. We did. We launched for GDC. We knew we were able to, and then we spent those 2 months just looking at what Steam comments were, engaging with the community, and some of the things people changed their reviews if they had any negative opinions or anything. Some of the things that they liked, we were able to kind of build on. Some of the things that there was problems, we were able to address, and so that was just one of the kind of the abridged version of HLV's development. Oh, one other thing is we originally started third person. We thought that you wanted to see more of the screen going on, so we started third person, and it was cool. You were able to see more, but it didn't have that sense of awe. One of our pillars was the sense of awe and grandeur.
Right, sense of awe.
Exactly. And so one of the professors, Ryan, he offhandedly said like, oh, you should make it first person. And we were like, yeah, okay, let's. We were a little hesitant, but we said, okay, let's try it. All we did was just move the camera from back here, put it right in the person's head, and immediately this sense of awe of like, holy shit, this creature is incredibly huge. The gameplay felt faster with just the camera change. And so literally right before our first, at the end of our first semester, you do this play. Everyone can come check out the game. That was our play test for this. If we said, okay, guys, we think first person's going to be the way to go, but we don't know. So we built in a toggle, hit a button, and you can switch between them. And immediately people playing the game preferred first person. So we were like, okay, we're not even going to tell them about the toggle anymore.
Exactly.
We know this is what we want. And yeah,
Exactly.
so we were really happy there. And yeah, I mean, that was a dangerous thing, but it just a little bit about the kind of development going in is that we were constantly even for what was essentially like our announce slash release launch type thing, still trying to get that in and iterate on it.
Yeah, like the whole story I listened, and the one thing I actually understood and actually I felt is that it felt like a family. The whole team and whole stuff felt like a family. Like you have clashes, you have disagreement, likings, and at the end you have shipped a successful product, and each and everyone is happy, and that's the experience I wanted to tell each and everyone. Because the main reason I started this podcast, because even that's on my description as well, is that whenever I love uh, seeing interviews and documentaries, and whenever I like see a interview, it's either of a billionaire or a millionaire or an entrepreneur or someone who has been already been successful. But the majority of people who are on the process, like you and me, no one shares their story. And that's the point I was committed. And I actually made one video, and the moment I had this idea, I picked up my mobile, go onto my front camera, and made a video what I want to do. Before I did any episode, I made that video. And and still here, today is the sixth episode, I guess sixth or fifth. No, I guess it's sixth episode we are, and it's going great.
Good.
And the very reason I was interested is that this experience you had, this is absolutely amazing. So thank you for sharing me, and I guess each and everyone who will listen to this will get a lot of value from this.
Oh, I hope so. It has been a long journey, and I think you're right. It totally is like a family. These are some of my best friends. They're spread across the country. One guy actually, he just moved back to India. But like these are some of my favorite people, and I'm still keeping in touch with them and playing games with them. Um, but yeah, and I guess one thing for anyone in that program, in the going to the university program like yourself, or really getting into games at all, the people are amazing. And you like I am not the most sociable person. Sorry if you can hear my dogs barking. I but I made the mistake in undergrad of not getting to know a lot of people in my psych degree, and so that hurt me. But in games, like you might not know anything about the person, but you know they're interested in games, and so
Yeah, that's a
it's a
connection
great
point.
touchstone, and they're great people. And it goes a long way building that network, and just the meeting everyone. Like if anything, like what's keeping me in games, like I love the passion from the players. I love the job. I love that I get to have meetings where a common topic is dragon, and is like a dragon, and all right, how do we make a dragon? Or like, you don't get to do that in other areas.
No,
But the
absolutely not.
people and their own passion, like that is the core of what making these are, and just what keeps me going.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Like this is amazing. I have to say this is like before I'm going to any question, I have to say this is amazing, and it's amazing. I don't have any other words to describe it.
It yeah, I absolutely love game dev, and what you're doing I think is great. Like um I know when I started in games, it was kind of this area of like how or before I started in games, it was like I like doing this, but I never thought of it as a job or like something you could do, until I got a little older and realized like, oh no, this is what you can do, and I absolutely love it. And I think a lot of people are kind of, especially younger people, are in that mindset of like, it's not something I can do. Someone out there in the world makes this, but not me. And yeah, 100% you
Yeah,
can, especially nowadays.
actually actually from it's coming from my side. It actually happened to me as well, because for a long time I thought about game development, but I couldn't actually gone forward with it. But at the end of the time, I did, because I totally focused my happiness over like what everyone else will think about me, as that I'm just making a game. And most of the people just don't do that, because they're always thinking what others will think if I'm just making a game, rather than what others expected me to do. So that's the reason a lot of people doesn't. But we are glad, and that's the reason we are getting this enormous experience in our life, and this is the experience for lifetime, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I get you on the like, what are others going to think on this? Like, um, and I guess the few things that I can say is one, do what you want to do. So yeah, like if so, that's a huge thing there. But then also, it is definitely hard to get into games. It is probably the hardest industry to get into. So it is really tricky, and you're probably going to need to do other things while getting into games, or do areas of game development that aren't your favorite while you're trying to get in. And apply it. Like, I got lucky. Riot's my dream studio, and I'm here now. But there's a lot that goes on to having to get there. And you're not necessarily going to be at your dream studio right away. Um, but it is, no matter what game you're working on, people are excited to hear you work in games. Like, like you've got little cousins or something, and you're talking like, I don't work on Fortnite, but little kids are like, "Oh, do you work on Fortnite?" And I get to say like, "I don't, but I know some people who work at Epic, and or I'm working on games." And there's definitely a little bit of like it is a fun job that everyone wants to talk about. And rather than going to some family event and being like, "I work in finance" or something like that, and not to bash on finance guys or anything, like, it's definitely a job and it's definitely a lot of work. It's not the most exciting thing to hear about, but games, everyone wants to talk about games.
Everyone
And
wants to
so
talk about. And my one of my cousin is really excited, and he loves to play action games. And whenever I get to make one, I like have him play that, and he's just really happy. Like, my brother is making this. I'm really happy.
exactly.
Yeah. So the coming to the questions, is that you have said that Riot is your dream company, and you are now in there. So what it's like to have an experience to work on a live game that's League of Legends. Like, it's one, if not the biggest, it's one of the biggest and most played game in the world. What's that experience for you?
Yeah. So to be clear, I am not working on League of Legends PC, like League of Legends proper, the game that kind of blew up and made Riot what it is. I am working on Wild Rift, which is, there's a lot of overlap. It's League of Legends on mobile and console. And as for it being live, we're doing a lot of like closed beta stuff right now, where we're at regional closed beta. So in certain parts of the world, we're testing things, how the game is. So just to clarify, I'm not on that team, and so it is a little bit of a different experience than like a live game. Sorry, I just dropped something. And so, and I'm also brand new on Wild Rift itself, so I haven't actually gotten to do a whole lot there. A lot of it has been onboarding, learning how our tools and engines and even just the structure of everything works, learning from a lot of the guys who have been on this for years and a lot longer than myself. So it's still, it's in this, I'm in this weird place where, like, it is definitely a dream come true. Like, I'm looking, I'm seeing players who are playing it, people excited to play the game I am working on. So there is a lot of excitement there. But I haven't done anything yet that players have seen. That's not that like, oh, there's some big secret thing coming up or anything. It's just that I am so new that my work has not made it into the game yet.
Yeah,
Um,
it's, I guess it's been 2 or 3 months you have joined Riots, right?
Not even that. Not even that. I've been here for just under a month of working here. So some of that is onboarding and learning everything, and some of that is I've made changes to the game, but we're testing them to see if they actually work how I expect them to, and everything that kind of goes through that process. They will get out to players. They will get out to players, and they'll get a chance to play it and get a feel for it and everything. But it's just ramping up for me, and any job you're going to have this ramp up period, and then you get to a point where I make changes and then it goes out to players shortly after. But that's just kind of how it goes there. But for the people who, I think it was like my second week that we finally did like our closed beta. So it was really weird because my first week was all learning about the company, learning how some stuff works, and then day one of me actually like working on the game, was when we did this closed beta. People got to try it, and so everyone's excited. The game's out, sort of out, and everything. And I'm like, go team! I didn't do anything, but like this is exciting.
That's right. That's right. Like you know, listening from your story, it actually inspires me, and I don't know if I can explain this, but I'm really glad that I am going into this field as well, because it's too much happiness. Honestly,
Oh yeah.
you get to do all of the stuff you want to do, and you can see real players actually working on the stuff you have made, and that's amazing.
Yeah, it really is. And like, um, yeah, I mean, I have not had, like, I've had other games, other smaller things, Hard Light Vector and so on, go out to players and get that feedback, and that is incredible. Um, but to work on something at the scale of like Hogwarts Legacy, when that goes out to players, and then when and Wild Rift, like players are playing it in these betas, but they're not playing anything I have done yet, and so there's this mix of like fear and excitement and just everything that kind of goes on there, but it is incredible. um, and I said, like you said, like it's fun. It's fun to be working on. It's fun to see how passionate everyone is. We've got worlds going on for League of Legends right now, and just seeing the passion from the players and everything there, the excitement of people wanting to play the game I'm working on, and yeah, it's a dream come true.
True, man. True. What are the projects you have worked on apart from like League of Legends? Like you have told that you have worked on Hardline Vector, and you have worked on Hogwarts Legacy. How was that experience?
So that was a very different from Riot in terms of just like what the game itself was. So that was my last day at EAE was my first day at Avalanche. I actually, so we did a big play test at the end of EAE being University of Utah's program.
Yeah.
We did a big play test type thing where everyone gets to come see the games as kind of their like final release state, and like it's possible to still work on the games but very unlikely and everything. So I missed the first half of that because it was my first day at Avalanche. And it's been cool. Like I can't say too much about what I was working on just because of where the game's at announce wise, but whereas something like Wild Rift, we are like you said, of people playing the game and getting to make changes. So I'm getting to see live data and then update the game. And well, we had a lot of playtests and everything kind of going into Hogwarts Legacy. It was also like when I was working on it, the game wasn't announced. No one knew what it was. Even the entire time I worked there, it had not been announced.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so
Your resume, even right now, your resume says it's an unannounced project as well as your LinkedIn.
exactly, yeah, I haven't updated that yet. But whereas like Wild Rift, I'm coming in and the game has been announced. It's not out to all the players and everything, so that's still similar, but it's still just a different experience when I can say this is the project I'm working on. This is the kind of stuff that I'm working on, and it's just different on the Hogwarts side. Once that game comes out, there'll be a little bit more that I'm able to kind of say, but right now it's still kind of, I don't want to take away from the announcement or the team themselves, because I've seen the stuff that they're working on. It's super cool, and I like the announced video that they did and everything. Like that's ecstatic. Um, but yeah, that's kind of as much as I think I can probably say right there.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, the first time I saw that video, and honestly, the first time I saw that video, at that point I already have talked with you back then, and that video came after a couple of days after that. I like, whoa. I am going to talk with people who are making this game. Oh my god, that's a dream come true. So that's amazing. Let me ask you a personal question. You are going into this big names and like Hogwarts Legacy, Wild Rift. do you think that your psychology degree and user experience somehow helps you being a better designer?
Yeah, I definitely do. I think it's kind of funny because psychology, it's one of those degrees where you can't do much with just a bachelor. Like, so I just have a bachelor's in psychology. When I say just, like, it's still a 4-year degree and everything, but it's one of those things that, like, yeah, you need to get a PhD, doctorate kind of stuff, to really, like, what to do what people think of as psychology. Um, but it's one of those degrees where it helps you in whatever field you go into. Philosophy is a lot of the same kind of way of, like, it helps you think and it helps you work with other people. And so I think it's super helpful in that, of just kind of, so like my focus in psychology was on human factors. For those that don't know, that's kind of like design psychology, or how to kind of the go-to example is the Norman door. If you've heard of that, the idea that, like, you see a door and it's got a handle, so you instinctively you pull on that door, versus like it's got a bore or a plate across there, and so you push on that door. Well, you
Wow,
can,
I didn't know that. I didn't know that at
yeah. So
all.
you, I mean, it's something that you'll probably notice all the time now. But like that cabinet that you have behind you, it's got handles. You're gonna pull and open that way. Just makes
Yeah,
sense.
that's
But
that's, that's the normal way.
exactly. And so it's built. They're called affordances. It's the idea that this object affords how you should use it. And so there's a lot of that with games too. Of like, if you give someone a bow and arrow, it's the same basic idea that you give someone a bow and arrow. Okay, they're probably a ranged character in something like League of Legends. We make them If you make them skinnier, they're more likely a squishy character, as opposed to like a giant rock golem like we've got Malphite. You just instinctively say, oh, he affords the idea of being a tank. And so a lot of that is kind of goes into psychology and just kind of understanding um, what people intuit different things as. Um, it's not so much in the, like, psychology in like the therapy sense. There's definitely games that focus more around that, but it's still, how do we get to elicit a particular feeling? How do we make something feel really tense for the player? This is more in, like, you're still going to have tense moments in a multiplayer game, but it's a lot harder to control when those come in a multiplayer game. And depending on the game, you might have the entire thing is incredibly tense. And so you use that psychology background to say, like, okay, these are things that we can use to make things tense. We know that, like, people, whether you're claustrophobic or not, smaller spaces kind of create these kinds of feelings. And so you may want to lean into some of that. But how I typically think about it and use it is just affording, or those affordances is probably the biggest thing. Um, just like, I've talked with people who are like, they design from almost what I think of as like a top down. If I am designing uh, a hunter character, think of like a hunter from World of Warcraft. They've got a bow, they've got a pet. Um, and so, okay, what kind of mechanics can go and feed into that? And so that's one direction that you can kind of afford things there. Or depending on the game and what you're trying to do in like an early prototyping stage, you might build a mechanic, say, oh, this is fun. What's the theme that we can kind of wrap this around? Like, oh, okay, this is a fun little game where when something comes up and hits you, you hit a button at the right time and an effect happens. Oh, that feels like a parry for a sword. And so if we give the character a sword, you can start to just instinctively, people say, oh, he's got a sword, he can parry.
Yeah.
And so it does a lot to kind of self-teach your game. Um, and that's where I think it's probably helped me the most.
Wow, wow, wow. Actually, I was listening to that and I actually understand how exactly those game characters and those design ideas has decided. And the main point I'm extracted from your like what you have said is that you guys make the design based on what you already have, and the people who perceive that, who understand the like inner theory from that. Like, if I have, like, as you have said, if I have a bow and arrow and the people can see he's a long range kind of weapon, and if you have a sword or dagger, it's kind of gives a like short range. And if it's a big like ogre type like character, it might be a little slow. But if it's a like a skinny character, he could be a lot more faster. And this is the thing, we don't have to tell, we can instinctively understand all this stuff. So this is the actually this is the reason I wanted to talk to you about design, because I wanted to know the theory, the reason goes behind the design. Because obviously that not every design goes randomly and you just thought in one morning and goes in that, it doesn't happen. So that's the reason, and you explained it so well, and I actually I have nothing to say more about it, honestly.
Okay. Yeah, and you'll want to depending on the game and stuff, you'll want to break those at certain times. Like fighting games, typically will use like a very fast, like a very fat, overweight type character, but make them fast, or particular things so that they can break those affordances. And just you'll learn when you want to, or whatever reason for that you may want to do something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I actually have asked lots of stuff I wanted to know from personally. Now let's get dive into some questions that the very small audience I have prepared for you.
Sure.
The first question is that okay, what do you think some qualities are essential to be a great game designer?
Uh, the first one that comes to mind is, I'd say, empathy. And what I mean by that in particular is your players. If there's a lot of ways that you can come to this, but like your players are passionate about your game, and sometimes that can be frustration, sometimes they can get angry about that, but that all comes from passion. But it's not just in like a reaction side there, but it's also putting yourself in their mindset of playing against a particular character. Again, thinking in like multiplayer games, it can be a lot of fun for me to be overpowered, and I can just one-shot everyone. Like there's definitely places where you can have fun doing that. But to then be on the receiving end of that, where you feel like I can't do anything against this opponent, that feels really bad. And so as a designer, you need to be able to put yourself into these different mindsets, and understand where people are coming from, as well as just understand that like if this isn't a game that you are interested in, or even a feature that you are necessarily interested in, how can you, why are the people that are interested in it, where are they getting their enjoyment? And so even if it's not your kind of game, at least understanding some of that. Some of the other things that I'd say are huge are, we touched on this a little earlier, of like communication. You're going to be working with people from all sorts of disciplines, whether that's engaging with players or not, but you're going to be working with engineers and you're going to be working with artists. And so you need to be able to communicate across that, and as well with other designers. They're going to have a different library of games that they pull from in their own background than you. Where can you make those connections? And how can you communicate things across that? And that kind of ties into, as a designer, a library of games is super helpful. You don't have to have played everything, but at least have some familiarity with very popular games, like you mentioned
Yeah,
Diablo 3.
absolutely.
So being able to kind of touch on and talk about a lot of that is super helpful. I also champion, and how much of this matters depends on what studio you're at. Not just what studio you're at, but like an indie studio, you're going to be working on a lot more things. You're going to be doing engineering and art and design, production as well, depending on the size. Whereas you can get more specialized going into more AAA studios, whereas like I'm not going to end up writing code or doing art too much, or really at all in my role. There may be some brief instances of like prototyping stuff, but that's a separate kind of thing. Whereas just knowing how to communicate with those other guys is helpful, but also knowing how to do some of that is super helpful as well. Let's see. I think that's probably the biggest stuff. And I think um, just a lot of like experiences to pull from in terms of knowing like what kind of game you're working on, knowing what kind of features elicit certain things. If I had to say, this kind of ties in, but if I had to say one piece of advice to anyone wanting to do game design, is go and do it. Like it, it's a lot of fun to talk about ideas, but there are definitely going to be days where it gets to, this is this is grueling. I need to fix bugs. It's not the sexy, exciting stuff that you think of when you think of game design. And so, uh, if you go make your own game, Unity or Unreal, I think are probably the best two to go with. But depending on what you're wanting to do, there's a lot of other things that you can try. Godot, Monogame. Hell, you can make a game in Minecraft, or like I got started with Warcraft 3 editors. There's a lot of
Wow.
space in that. um, Go through and do that and see what it goes from, like, here's an idea, to building something, to play testing, to iterating on that something, to getting player feedback, to then iterating on it again or making whatever changes. That's a huge part. And when I say player feedback, I'm not saying that you have to launch to hundreds of players or anything like that. I'm saying have your friends play it and try and and early on, when your skills are going to grow rapidly, do something like that where you make a game in a week, or a game jam that's over a weekend, and then just rapidly make things like that. I think a lot of people, myself included, will make a mistake where I want to make my dream game, and then you can't. Not, you just don't have the skills yet. It's you underestimate how long it takes to do. So make something small and kind of work your way through. Make something small, put it aside, take what you learned, make something small, repeat.
Yeah, actually, that's the same thing I'm doing right now. I'm making very very small arcade type games to understand the mechanics behind it, the code behind it, the bugs
Mm-hmm.
behind it. And actually, today I actually enrolled one of the Unity game jams that's going to happen later this month. Uh,
Perfect.
so that's the kind of stuff. Actually, I'm really scared about that game jam because I never even ever participated in game jam ever before. So I'm kind of nervous about that.
I will tell you, my first game jam, I had done a few Unity classes, nothing super big, a lot of the tutorials and stuff, but my first game jam was, I sat with people I didn't know. I was lucky in that I knew one guy on my team, and it was with his group of friends, but I sat with them and basically way. They were super cool about it. Like, I get that it can be really kind of unnerving to have someone asking you questions and stuff as you're going through, but it really helped me kind of get through, and kind of backseat still help work on the game that they're doing. Now, I don't think I think I probably should have developed my own skills before the game jam a bit more, because you don't want to go in completely blind of, like, I have no idea what to do. Know what you kind of bring to the table, whether it's art, engineering, whatever, and then be able to work with the team. But even then, like, you're gonna work with people, you're gonna learn a lot, and then you just take it going into the next one.
Wow, that's really helpful advice for me myself as well. I'm going to absolutely gonna take it. And as this game jam going to be with, like, I thought about doing it solo first time and not going to do it with others, and that might be the case because I'm really scared. So thank you again. So the next question is what a beginner game designer should do to get into AAA studios like Riot, Warner Brothers, and something.
Yeah, I think kind of like I said on the last, I think it's start making stuff. It, Game design, games in general, but game design in particular, it's one of those things where everybody wants to do it. You're at a young age, it's like, I want to be a designer, I have cool ideas. You see stuff like that all the time. And ideas are nice, but it's the execution that's really important, and can you stick it through? That's super important there. So I think, start making stuff, see what it's like going all the way through, and build up that portfolio. because if someone comes to me and they're like, I want to make games, how do I get a job at Riot or something like that? If you haven't done anything already, it's really hard for me to know where your skills are at. You may have a lot of really good design sense, but until you've actually had a chance to test that in some regard, I can't see that. And it's also just game design that it's super competitive. It's a very passion driven industry, and there's good and bad that comes with that, but there's a lot of, it's super hard to get in, and if you're not showing that this is something that you're really interested in doing, it can be hard to get in. It's getting in is the hardest part about working in games. Once you've kind of gotten in and gotten some experience, it's very common for people to move between studios, and that they'll move from a AAA studio, work on an indie game, back to AAA. All of that kind of stuff can move around. But just getting in is the hardest part, and the best way to get in is to show that, yeah, I can do this, because what you're asking is, whatever studio you apply with, you're asking them to take a chance on you, so you want to show them that it is as low of a risk of a chance as possible.
Wow, that's absolutely great. Like, yeah, that's absolutely true, because you know what? Before I applied to University of Utah, we had to submit our portfolios, and that I had 11 games in that portfolio.
So yeah, see, that's great. Like I had, I think, one or two that I got to show. I didn't have to do a code review and stuff because I went in the production track, but yeah, like that's the kind of stuff that you want to be able to show. And the school's a great way to be able to meet the people who are doing this, and kind of go from there. And I think what you're doing of like trying it out beforehand is great, because I've worked with people who they thought, oh, well, I want to work in games. I love playing games. I should like working in them. It makes sense. It's not necessary. It's not 100% true. People who work on games, they love games, but people who love games don't necessarily love working on games.
Yeah, absolutely.
But so try your hand at making some first before you spend a lot of time applying in an incredibly competitive field, or applying to these schools that are also incredibly competitive to get into. And it's going to cost a lot of money to go to school for this. And then if you find out this isn't what you want to do, save yourself some heartache, make something first and see if this is great, if this is what you like.
Yeah, absolutely. Like when I was in my third year of my engineering bachelor's, which was 2 years from now, I started making games, and I'm only in game development for a little bit over 2 years right now. So as an engineer, I love working on like Unity and Unreal, but moreover, I love making games and making game engines by myself, doing raw codes and making. I have already made 2 game engines, and that's one of the stuff I really wanted to do. So I made one of those. I'm really proud of that, and now I'm prototyping on Unreal and Unity. So it's been an incredible journey. So coming back to
Yeah.
your point, you have said that in the like as a game designer's portfolio has to be the number one stuff they need to focus on. So what should be in game designers portfolio? Like we know game producers portfolio is different. Like engineers portfolio is lots of code. What should be in game designers portfolio?
That can be tricky, because even mine that you had looked at there, like it's got there's some stuff in there. Like, to be clear, I am proud of all the projects that I've worked on. I need to update how I portray a lot of that information, though. Some things that are super helpful is when you're talking about a game that you worked on, if you I say I was interviewing you, I care about what you did on that project. A brief overview of something of like, here's what the game is, can go a long way. Saying it's like this, it's like game X meets game Y, Pokemon meets World of Warcraft or whatever. Probably don't want to work on a MMO on your own side project stuff. That'd be very difficult, but sidetrack that. But do something where so that I have an overview of what the game is, and then what your role on that game is. Well, if you're like, hey, I did design, design can be a lot. So I did design on, like, using hard light vector as an example. I worked on the bosses, I worked on the enemies, etc. And then talk about those challenges. If you just say, even if just saying I worked on X doesn't tell me what you did on that. It tells me, okay, the final product is, I can see the final product if I go play the game or if there's a video. But I want to know what those challenges are that you ran into and how you dealt with those. Whether that's personal challenges, whether that's mechanical things that have to change, those are all super important that I care about, because if I'm hiring you, I want to know how you're going to mesh with my team. I want to know how you think about problem solving. To echo back really to an earlier question there of like, what is game design? Is problem solving. Is kind of, I want to add that to the list there of figuring out how to problem solve, and how to work on all that. And so I want to know how you're handling that. And then I think videos are also really important. That's probably the biggest thing that I would want to add to my own portfolio is a blog or something like that is helpful for someone to read and get an idea of what they want to do, or what you did, but a video can show that. Whether that's, here's a quick gameplay clip and it's you talking over what you did, not only does that teach me a little bit about the game, if it's something that goes out to players may be really interested in that, but me as working on that, I can see your thought process and I can see, here's the challenges that you ran into. One thing that we did for Hard Light Vector, and that a team before us, Clawface, did, that was, they were the year before us, and I highly recommend doing this yourself, is they got a video of, here's what our game looks like at 1 week, then 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, etc., all the way down, and put that together, and you saw what the game looked like over its development. Do that same kind of thing with a feature that you're working on, and so that I can see, oh, it started as this, it evolved in this direction.
Like the whole
um,
journey, the whole journey of the game, and it's kind of like a documentary of making game.
in a sense, yeah, like, keep it short enough to where, like, I'm, especially as a recruiter, to be clear, I have never actually hired someone in game development, but this is just from my experience talking with recruiters and my process when I was applying and what I had learned. But there's a lot of people applying to games. And I, as a recruiter, don't have time to look over all your stuff. And I'm going to get really bored reading, even if it takes 2 minutes to read whatever you've written on one game. How many times can you honestly expect someone to do that across your games? So only show your best stuff there. But also, I'm going to have tens, hundreds of different people that I'm looking at for this. And so I can only spend so much time. So a video is just a nice break for whoever, and it's a good way to kind of convey a lot of information in a short amount of time that I don't have to read through. And it also can show a lot of your personality coming through a lot easier than writing can for some people.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Like when I was reading your blog on that website, I thought that, oh my God, this person is a great writer, and he actually when I was reading, I actually thought that I was talking to you. That that was that fluent. But
Oh, thank you.
obviously, I had I had that time for myself, but recruiters might have other works. So
Yeah,
that's the thing. That's that. Obviously, that's the point. I'm going to steal from you, and I'm going to add a video on my portfolio as well.
definitely. Yeah, for projects that you're working on, I think that's a really good way to go. And show your skill set. Some of the stuff that I had done that you see on there is like, here's an example system. It's not even a game that I've worked on or that I am working on or anything like that. It's just, I, as someone who really enjoys systems design, here's a loot system and how that works. That's probably one of the things I'm most proud about that's on there right now. But show what you can do, because that's what I care about if I'm hiring someone. What can you do? What can you offer me or my team? What would you joining the team be like? What would that mean? And not just your skill set, but also you as a person. And especially for design, that can even be more important in a lot of ways, because I don't want to work with an asshole. And
Yeah,
if
true.
you're, yeah, exactly. Like and especially for games, just because I need to know, are you, what are you championing? Are you championing your ideas? Are you championing someone else's idea? Are you championing what's best for the player? If you pitch an idea, and then find out that we can't do that, or maybe there's a better idea, or your idea doesn't work for some reason, are you emotionally slash consciously able to discard that for what we say is a better idea? Um, and that's something that especially newer designers struggle with. Um, so kind of I'd keep that in mind too. And I think every designer can struggle with it time to time, but it's definitely something that shows up more in newer designers. And I think that's part of a mindset of, I need to prove to you that I know what I am talking about. Um, and so it turns into this, I am right, I need to prove it kind of mindset. And that can be really tricky, but you want to be able to get past that.
True, true, absolutely true. Because you are a psychology student, and I love psychology. Honestly, I love psychology, and one of the main area I really love, like, reading on and working on, is that computational neuroscience, and that kind of connects with psychology. And that's the reason I could understand there is a lots of insecurities of people that kind of shows inside when they behave. So that's the very good thing that you have told. And I guess each and everyone who's seeing the video would understand how hard and how competitive in this industry is. And they get to work with very, like, not a lot of people, but very people who are close to them, so they have to behave like them. So there's a last question I have for yourself, is that any advice to any beginners who wants to be a game designer in future?
Yeah, I think that kind of echoes back to what we've been talking about. But make games, work with other people. Um, what what are your goals in terms of, like, do you want to work at a AAA studio? Are you like double A indie? You get a lot more control as you kind of go down, that the fewer A's, the more control you get. And what is it that excites you? Is it you have some dream game that you want to work on, and you're going to be working on that on the side no matter what? Like, I get a job anywhere, my free time I'm going to be working on this game, um, versus working on a AAA game. I am working on something else, and I may not have as much freedom to work on what I want to. Uh, Again, Riot's really cool in that, like, I actually get a lot of freedom on some of this stuff, but there are still goals that we are trying to hit, and areas that need focus. Um, so know what your goals are there. I think kind of that pillar mentality of, like, so that just the pillars are like, what is the game and what isn't the game. So like we talked about for Hard Light Vector, fast fluid movement was something that we really wanted, so that was all of our prototypes, kind of went through that. Sense of awe and grandeur that came with our boss being as big and grand as in these kind of attacks and everything that were going on there. So like pillars were super important there, and I think that's just a really good mindset for people to get into. um, and it helps you focus both your ideas and focus on what's important. um, like I said, doing it is super important, of just making games in your free time. It doesn't have to, I don't think that it should be all consuming. Like, you do want to go play games, you want to go do other things, be with your friends and stuff, but show that this is check for yourself if it's really what you want to do. Because again, if you want to play games professionally, this is not that. Um,
True.
and it I find for myself, I actually like working on games more than playing most games. um, I before I even knew that I wanted to make games, like I raided in World of Warcraft, and that sense of like 25 people working together on a singular goal, that's something that I that I still want today, and I get that feeling from working on games. And is that what you're wanting, is working on games? Because there's also times where you're working on a game and you're like, I am just sick of this game right now, because you're working on it, you're playing it and everything. So maybe that's not what you're wanting to do. So really know if this is what you're wanting to do, and then if it is, do it. And figure out what, like, take classes online, work on it with friends, find communities, do the game jams like you're doing. I think that's a great way to kind of get started in there, and then apply and keep applying. It's really hard to get in, for newer developers, newer designers, but that's the kind of thing that you can give yourself an edge on by doing all those things. And meeting people too. I know a lot of people in games can be quite shy, myself included, and that's just something that it's helpful to kind of push past, knowing that everyone in games loves games. Everyone in games, a lot of people, like I said, a lot of people can be shy, but if and they want someone else to make that first move. And so if you're willing to do that and talk to people, then that's great. And also, because it is a passion-driven industry, a lot of people are excited to talk about what they're working on. Maybe it may not be something that they can talk about a lot right now, but you look and say, hey, I saw you worked on this game a few years ago. I'm really interested in this. What can you tell me? And more often than not, I think you'll see people are pretty excited to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's true. And the very point you have said, that a lot of people are very shy. Actually, recently I asked one of, like, he's on in a company, he's working on a simulation company, and I asked him if he wants to join in my podcast, and he said, I'm really shy and I don't really know how I can give value, so maybe after a couple of years I will surely, but not now. So but one thing I could connect with him is that he loves games, he loves making games, and I love making games. So that was like the fluid point of between us, and we can talk about it, and that's the reason. And that's really amazing to like experience all of your journey. And I am really grateful, and I'm really considering myself lucky, as that I have to listen to your story and stories, other story as well. And that's really great. And honestly, when I'm going to Utah, and when someone going to ask me, hey, what stuff you do other than doing this, and I'm going to tell that I have a podcast where these people came and I know their story. And honestly, I already feeling so great about myself, I can't even explain.
That's good. That's good. And yeah, doing stuff like this is super helpful. Just getting yourself out there and being able to work with a team. Again, if you're wanting to do like an indie project, and anyone listening, like your own self indie project, obviously teamwork's a little less important there because it's just you, but that is really hard, especially if you want to make money off of it. Teamwork, no matter what role you're in, whether it's design, art, engineering, production, anything, you are going to be working with other people, and so that's huge.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you so much for coming to Tyrant Podcast. And I absolutely make sure that each and everyone, each and everywhere, all the connections I have, see this podcast and can get great value and all the stuff you have said.
Perfect. Yeah. I'm excited to see more of them and everything. So yeah, I'm really happy that you're doing this. And thanks for having me on. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much.